Theories of freedom. Freedom stands as a foundational and enduring concept in philosophy, explored across diverse traditions and historical periods. Philosophers have long grappled with its nature, scope, and ethical significance, both for individuals and societies. This discourse delves into the principal theories of freedom, surveying influential thinkers, their core ideas, philosophical underpinnings, critiques, and the practical relevance of freedom in everyday life. Freedom as autonomy, Immanuel Kant's moral framework. At the heart of Kantian philosophy lies a conception of freedom as autonomy, the capacity of rational agents to act according to moral laws they prescribe to themselves, independent of external or alien influences. Kant famously asserted, "Freedom is the property of such a will as can be determined independently of alien causes" in his Critique of Practical Reason. This notion transcends mere impulse or desire-driven action. True freedom manifests when individuals act according to universalizable principles, exemplified by the categorical imperative. For instance, choosing to tell the truth despite personal disadvantage exemplifies autonomous moral reasoning, highlighting the ethical responsibility embedded within freedom. However, critics argue that Kant's rationalist emphasis marginalizes the emotional and relational dimensions that shape human freedom, suggesting his framework may be overly abstract and insufficiently grounded in lived experience. Freedom as the absence of constraint, Locke and Berlin's political perspectives. John Locke advanced a political conception of freedom rooted in the absence of external constraints, particularly through safeguarding natural rights, life, liberty, and property. Locke's view, articulated in the Second Treatise of Government, emphasizes that freedom exists when individuals are not subject to arbitrary power, encapsulated in his statement that freedom means not living under the inconstant, uncertain, unknown, arbitrary will of another. This understanding anchors liberal democratic institutions and underscores the rule of law as a guarantor of political liberty, protecting, for example, freedom of speech. Yet, critics observe that Locke's framework can justify social inequalities, as property rights frequently benefit the privileged. Building on this, Isaiah Berlin offered a nuanced distinction between two forms of freedom: negative freedom, the absence of interference, and positive freedom, the capacity to act according to one's own will and rationality. Berlin warned that emphasizing positive freedom risks authoritarianism, where authorities impose their conception of the common good, thus curtailing individual liberty. His caution underscores ongoing tensions in political philosophy regarding how best to conceptualize and protect freedom. Freedom as self-realization, Hegelian and Marxist views. Hegel conceptualized freedom as self-realization achieved through integration within ethical life or Sittlichkeit, the interwoven institutions of family, civil society, and the state. He famously declared, "The history of the world is none other than the progress of the consciousness of freedom." True freedom, in this account, entails recognizing oneself as part of a collective ethical order, with democratic participation serving as a prime example. However, Hegel's elevation of the state has faced criticism for potentially endorsing authoritarian tendencies under the guise of collective freedom. Karl Marx reinterpreted freedom through a socio-economic lens, defining it as liberation from economic oppression and alienation engendered by capitalist modes of production. According to Marx, as outlined in Capital, freedom can only consist in socialized man, the associated producers, rationally regulating their interchange with nature. Under capitalism, workers' freedom is curtailed by their reduction to mere instruments of production. Emancipation requires abolishing class structures to allow individuals to pursue creative and fulfilling activities. Critics, however, caution that Marx's collective emphasis may suppress individual autonomy in favor of broader social goals. Existential freedom, Sartre and Camus on radical responsibility. Existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre revolutionized freedom by situating it within the radical responsibility to define one's essence through choices. Sartre's proclamation that man is condemned to be free captures the paradox that while individuals possess absolute freedom, this freedom entails an overwhelming burden of responsibility. In this view, one cannot shift blame to society or fate. The decision to pursue a career or life path rests solely on the individual, promoting authenticity and personal accountability. Nevertheless, critics argue Sartre's stark portrayal downplays real-world structural constraints, such as poverty or discrimination. Albert Camus expanded on existential freedom, by linking it to the confrontation with life's inherent absurdity and the imperative to create meaning despite this. His statement, "The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion, from the rebel," embodies this defiant stance. Camus' myth of Sisyphus symbolically illustrates freedom as embracing a futile task with courage. Yet, critics maintain that his philosophy offers limited guidance for practical resistance against oppressive systems. Freedom as power and agency, Arendt and Foucault's political and ethical insights. Hannah Arendt emphasized freedom as the capacity to act and initiate within the public sphere, positing that freedom is the raison d'être of politics. For Arendt, freedom flourishes through collective action and democratic participation, exemplified by movements such as the civil rights struggle. She champions civic engagement and robust, democratic institutions as essential for sustaining freedom. Critics note, however, that her focus on political freedom may underplay the personal and economic dimensions equally crucial to lived freedom. Michel Foucault offered a critical perspective, framing freedom as resistance to pervasive power structures that shape individuals' perceptions of what is possible. He argued, freedom is the ontological condition of ethics, highlighting that acts such as challenging gender norms within patriarchal societies represent expressions of freedom. While Foucault's focus on power relations enriches our understanding of freedom's complexities, critics contend his approach lacks a normative foundation for justice, making it difficult to articulate clear ethical prescriptions. Libertarian and Republican conceptions, Nozick and Pettit. Robert Nozick's libertarian philosophy foregrounds minimal state interference, prioritizing the protection of individual rights and property. He succinctly stated, "Individuals have rights, and there are things no person or group may do to them," advocating for a free market that maximizes personal choice free from governmental constraints. However, this libertarian vision faces criticism for overlooking systemic inequalities that severely limit individuals' meaningful freedom. Conversely, Philip Pettit's Republican theory of freedom emphasizes freedom as non-domination. Freedom exists only when no one is subject to arbitrary control by others. Pettit maintains that freedom is a condition in which the individual is not subject to the arbitrary will of another, underscoring the importance of institutional checks and balances to prevent tyranny. Critics argue that this conception remains overly focused on political structures and may insufficiently account for individual autonomy outside the political sphere. Philosophical roots and ongoing debates. The rich discourse on freedom emerges from core philosophical domains, metaphysics, ethics, and political philosophy. Metaphysical inquiries explore the compatibility of free will with determinism, illustrated by thinkers such as Descartes and Spinoza. Ethical discussions, particularly Kantian autonomy, emphasize the moral obligations entwined with freedom. Political philosophy addresses freedom in the context of governance, rights, and justice, as exemplified by Locke and Rousseau. Ongoing debates revolve around tensions such as free will versus determinism, where compatibilists argue for their coexistence, while incompatibilists deny it. The divide between individual and collective freedom surfaces starkly between Marx's focus on social emancipation and libertarianism's emphasis on individual rights. Berlin's distinction between positive and negative freedom continues to illuminate conflicts between personal agency and protection from interference. The relevance of freedom in everyday life. These theories are far from abstract, they deeply inform our daily experiences and social structures. Existentialist freedom inspires individuals to embrace personal responsibility, encouraging ownership of choices and actions. Arendt and Petit remind us of the vital role political engagement plays in preserving democratic freedoms. Marx and Foucault alert us to systemic barriers, poverty, discrimination, oppressive ideologies, that impede genuine freedom, advocating for social justice efforts. Meanwhile, Kantian autonomy offers a moral compass for ethical living, urging actions guided by universal principles. Conclusion? In sum, philosophical theories of freedom, from Kant's rational autonomy, through Marx's collective liberation, to Sartre's existential responsibility, offer profound insights into human agency and societal organization. Despite divergent emphases, these frameworks collectively enrich our understanding of freedom as both a deeply personal and inherently social phenomenon. Their continuing application to contemporary issues, ranging from human rights to economic inequality, underscores the complexity and enduring importance of freedom in our world. If you found this exploration insightful, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated on future content exploring the rich landscapes of philosophy and beyond.